video, what I'm going to do is demonstrate one of the techniques that I use in editing photos that were taken during low light. This is a photo that was taken during a live performance of a play. Some of the things that you need to remember if you do this type of photography is you need to try to get as much light into the camera as possible. But during a performance such as this, it can be a challenge to get your settings exactly right. You can see for this particular shot that we're going to be working on that I had my shutter speed at 1/30th of a second. The lens that I was using does have image stabilization. Now that is something that will help you tremendously, is to have a lens that has that feature. I also shot this at f5. Now my ISO was at 1250. The shutter speed is one way that you can get your photos in lower light. However, if you drag that shutter too long, you're going to get motion blur in your photos. The trade-off of that is, of course, the ISO. If you turn up the ISO too high, you will get noise in your photo. So I try to keep it from going extremely high, but it is necessary to bump that ISO up to get the shot. But once again, you try to keep a balance between your shutter speed and your ISO, just to keep that grain out. But at the same time, in a scene such as this, you want to freeze the motion. Fortunately, the actor in this part of the scene was standing very still, so I was able to get the shot. Another point in editing photos such as this, I highly recommend that you shoot in camera raw. If you are not currently shooting in camera raw, you need to start. You're going to get much more flexibility in editing your photos if you use camera raw than you will just using the standard JPEG format. So let's go ahead and get started here. This is, of course, a raw file I am using. This is, of course, Adobe Bridge. I'm going to be editing this with Adobe CS6. It is not the latest format of Adobe. However, there are still a lot of people that use CS6, and it is still a great program. Even though Adobe has gone to a subscription-based program, CS6 works just fine. So we'll go ahead and open the photo in Camera Raw. This is the raw editor. One of the first things that I like to do when I edit a photo such as this is go in and do the lens correction. You want to ensure that you enable your lens correction on this. This is something that can remove a little bit of distortion created by the lens that you use. It's, for this, I have it set up automatically. I just click that and you saw the little flicker to where it corrected any distortion in that lens. There's also adjustments to where you can change that if necessary. This, of course, is my lens information that I was using. So it works well for this shot. So all I have to do is hit that and it takes care of it for me. So the next thing that we're going to work on a little bit is some of the exposure. Once again, in editing this, you don't want to go too high because you will introduce noise into the shot, and we want to try to keep it as clean as possible. I'm just going to bump it up slightly. Now you'll see the saturation in the photo coming out a little bit more. Normally, if I was doing a portrait, I would, of course, correct the white balance. I would, select the correct white balance that I was needing for this particular shot and would adjust that appropriately. However, once again, during a play such as this, there is a lot of colorful lighting. That lighting is continually changing, so it is impossible to get a completely accurate white balance for your system. And that is another advantage, though, of shooting in camera raw, is if you do have your white balance, if you do have something that you can reference, you can actually change the white balance and correct the white balance much easier in camera raw than you can on a JPEG file. So we are just going to leave our white balance as it shot straight out of the camera and go from there. Once again, I have just slightly bumped up the exposure. Now, if I wanted to fill in some of these darker areas, there's many ways of doing it. For this particular photo, I'm just going to bring this up slightly. I don't want to get too wild with it, just a little bit, not much. And I'm also going to bring the clarity up on this. I want to give it just a little bit more structure. Nothing too extreme, but something that will help the shot look a little better, in my opinion. Now then, just to touch on the vibrance. Once again, this was a performance. I want those colors to kind of pop, and it will look a little bit better. If there are any types of distortions or anything in your photos, you can remove them in Camera Raw. Some of these little speckles that you may see in this here were part of the background scene, and it would be easy to remove them. You will simply select the spot removal tool. You can come down to where one of those are and simply click and drag. Basically, you can just highlight those and you will be able to pull those out of the shot very easy. And once we get those cleaned up, we will go from there. Once again, we go back to our edit screen. You can see that there's still a few more here. So we can go back into our spot removal and grab a few more of these also. I'm just going to get a larger area for this one, and we'll go from there. We can do a little more cleanup later on. The next step that we want to do is we're going to actually increase our noise reduction just a little bit. And once again, this was shot at a little higher ISO. I'm just going to bump it up slightly. I just want to remove just a little bit of the grain that is in this shot, nothing too extreme. And you know, you can do wherever you need to go with it. You can correct in that. If you start bumping up the sharpness, you will add noise in some places because it will show up in some places. However, by using a combination of the structure, the clarity slider here, and the noise reduction, we can get rid of some of that noise in these photos. And you can see how that is looking there. One of the things that I want to do also, and it's another good way of hiding some of the background noise if you don't really want it in your shot, is of course to crop. For one thing, we're going to go ahead and crop this out slightly, and I'm not going to lose all of it, but you know, if you turn your grids on, I recommend that too. That way you can kind of get a little bit better idea, the rule of thirds, when you do your crop. So that kind of helps it go very well also. And once you select that, you simply hit your enter, and we've gotten rid of a little of that area that we don't really need. And it's not perfect, but for demonstration purposes, it works fine. Now then, something else that we can do also to bring in a little more, if we click on our FX tab here, we can add just a little bit of a vignette. Nothing heavy, just keep it subtle. You know, we have a real dark background already, so we don't want to go too extreme. You know, if we were to take it all the way down, you can start to see a lot of the photo actually disappear there. We're going to bring it up slightly. All right, we don't want to go too heavy with it, just enough to hide a little bit more of that background. Once again, here we can actually change the midpoint of the vignette, and you can see that it does change the way the vignette looks in the photo. Now that, of course, is a great way to help hide some of the background. I'm going to go up just a little bit more, fill light. I'm going to bring the brightness up slightly, just a little bit more. And there, that is just about where we need to be. Now pay attention to your histogram here. This can give you an idea of where you are with your exposure. You can see that we have quite a few highlights as well as quite a few of extremely dark areas in this shot. And that's something that you can be mindful of, because Your computer screen, if you were to print these photos, your computer screen is not necessarily going to be calibrated the same way that a printer would be calibrated. This photo could end up being quite dark. However, if you use this, it will give you a pretty good indication of where you need to go with your exposure. Of course, correcting for and calibrating for the printer you're using is a great way to ensure that you correctly expose any of the photos that you are doing. Now, we have got this at, about where we're going to go with it for this demonstration. I'm going to hit Open Item, and what it's going to do here is simply populate the file in the regular Adobe Photoshop palette. This is my panel for, I do have the Nik software, which is a great little software package for doing a lot of custom work to photos. And we also have our normal Adobe Photoshop panels as well, to where we can edit this however we would like. This is just a quick demonstration on how I will edit some of the photos that I do. I hope you liked the video. I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. Leave me any comments down below. And please subscribe to my channel. I'd appreciate it. And thanks for watching.